Hello, welcome back to my channel. Hi. I don't know how I should like point my camera because over here you could see like my clothes, but over here it's kind of like, you know what? It's gonna be the same. It's gonna be the same. Anyway, uh, yeah. Gonna talk about books again, as usual. But first, I just kind of want to share what I'm currently reading at this moment. I'm reading a bunch of stuff, but I'm focusing on this particular book because I'm feeling kind of monogamous now. And I am kind of, loyal towards this particular book here. It was something that I just started like a couple of days ago. Farewell to My Concubine by Lilian, an author from Hong Kong. This was originally written in Chinese, translated to English by Andrea Lingenfelter. And just a bit of introduction. This book was first written in copyright Lipiqua 1992. I mean, Lipiqua is basically Lilian Li. So I would say at this point I'm kind of mesmerized by this book. Yeah, and I think that's a good situation because the last few books that I finished weren't exactly like the best of the best in my personal reading life so far, but they have some interesting bits in there as well. But it feels really good to have found something that kept me glued to the pages while I'm reading them. So this book is definitely that. But yeah, I think this is kind of interesting. I didn't mention what this book is about. Very briefly, it's about the sort of friendship between two Peking opera actors sometime in the 30s in China. And it's interesting, this friendship between these two guys. It's kind of interesting. It's going to develop into something much more fascinating. If you have seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about. But I'm looking forward to see that unfold. So far, I'm only at about like 40 out of 250 pages, so I'm not that, far into the story yet. But so far, I'm liking it. But anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about books that I have actually finished. I got these two books right here. Both of them are translated fiction. And both of these books to me were kind of okay. Like on Goodreads I gave them about like 2 to 3 stars out of 5, but then again, star ratings are reductive, so let's not think too much about star ratings, shall we? So the first one that I finished was this book. This is called Affections by Rodrigo Hasbún. Rodrigo Hasbún is a Bolivian author, and this book was originally written in Spanish. It was translated to English by Sophie Hughes. And it's a very slim book. So basically, this book is about this family who lives in La Paz, Bolivia. And it is based on an actual family in real life. The Alto family who escaped from Germany. And what's interesting about the Alto family was that the patriarch of this family, Hans, used to work as the cameraman for Nazi propagandist Leni Riefenstahl, and was rumored to be her lover. And that's one thing that was interesting with this family. And another interesting thing with this family is that the daughter, one of the daughters in this family, named Monica Ertel, was also the person who assassinated the official who has something to do with the execution of Che Guevara. And therefore, Monica Ertel became someone that was kind of important to the revolutionary cause in the history of South America. And based on these tidbits, like facts about this family, one would expect to, that this book, which is kind of like the fictionalization of this family, to be very interesting in the sense that it will be kind of embroiled in their, I would say, historical significance of these individuals. Very briefly, this novel, as it turns out, it's indeed is about this family, but it focuses more on the, I would say, how the Alto family kind of experienced some kind of dissolution after a particularly eventful expedition led by Hans Ertel. And this particular expedition, the purpose was to find the lost city of Paititi. And after this expedition, we kind of see this family just kind of breaking apart, dissolving because of various reasons. And we would also eventually see that one of the daughters, Monica, becoming a revolutionary activist. And then the other daughters in this book, I think their names are Heidi, if I'm not mistaken, and Trixie. Yep. They've also experienced some kind of changes in their lives related to what's going on with their family. But basically, the changes that they experience in their life aren't like healthy changes, because the family is essentially breaking apart. So in a way, this book is kind of like a historical fiction / domestic fiction, where we see the evolution of this family from, going from a family unit, and just kind of like where the members just goes off their own ways. So at first, I had this expectation that because this book is a fictionalization of actual historical individuals, especially individuals with association with, I would say, important parts of history, that there would be some kind of mystique surrounding these individuals. And I thought that this novel is going to kind of lean on to that mystique and kind of make these individuals larger than life. And I would say, after reading this book, that was not the case. Instead, this book, in fact, kind of made this character feel much more humanized, which is something that I kind of enjoy as well. I wouldn't mind the first approach, but I also, I'm okay with this approach as well. What this book does is that it kind of shows the inner thoughts, the inner workings the motivations of these characters. Okay, you know what? Scratch that. Because that was also where I had a tiny issue with this book. We definitely see and hear a lot of the inner voices of these characters as they narrate part of their stories. But motivation isn't exactly something that is very strongly featured in this book. So one of the characters, Monica Ertl, one of the daughters in this family, she ends up becoming an activist who's involved in activities that are very much against the government and very militant and all that. So we see this change happening with this character, but personally I don't really understand from this book why that change happened, and I don't think that this book really explains well. It only shows us, maybe I've missed it, but it shows us how Monica and also the other daughters, Heidi and Trixie, how their childhood was, around the time of the expedition when it happened with their father, how their relationship with their father was, how their relationship with their mother was, and how their childhood was basically not exactly like the most ideal childhood. And I suppose readers can sort of have their own conjectures as to what exactly happened inside these daughters. Like for example, inside Monica, that sort of pushed her towards the path of becoming a militant activist. But the problem is that it doesn't really have like a strong, like this book doesn't really have a strong stance on what exactly it was going on mentally with these characters that motivates them towards that change. It just shows us this character was like this, and then after that this character was like that. That's it. And it's also short, so really it was kind of spare in a sense that you don't get a lot of information. So I suppose readers who like texts that are kind of spare in a sense, to be some kind of beige prose, maybe you'll enjoy this book. If you like, filling in the blanks, maybe this would be something that you want to go for. I personally thought that it was just kind of okay. It didn't move me because of that reason. Like, it didn't feel punchy enough. But at the same time, parts of this novel also felt kind of melodramatic. So yeah, it was a little bit bizarre. I would say though, I like the ending of this novel. The ending felt kind of there's a sense of circular plot going with the ending, like how the beginning of this book we see the father bringing their at least two of their daughters to an expedition to uncover the lost city, a mythical lost city in the jungle of Bolivia. And then the ending of this book also has something to do with digging. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it's about, but it has something to do with digging, and I just kind of find it really interesting that, the ending and the beginning has a little bit something to do with, uncovering the dirt, like digging the dirt or the soil in Bolivia by these family from Germany. So it's interesting, I think. But overall it wasn't like, super emotionally punchy. Anyway, let me know if you have read this book and what you think about it. So I'm gonna move on to the second one. If this book was really, like spare, and beige, This book was like the total opposite. This is like a purple prose galore. This is The Blind Earthworm in the Labyrinth by Thai author Veeraporn Nitiprapha. And this book was originally written in Thai. It was translated to English by Rithdee. And I think this was the debut novel of this author. And this novel is about three main characters, I would say. And these three main characters are young people. So we have two sisters named Chalika and Charya, and then one boy named Pran. So Chalika and Charya had parents, but their father sort of was involved in was unfaithful towards the mom, and so basically that kind of ruined their marriage, and their mom ends up doing things that just sort of didn't feel super responsible as far as when it comes to her her motherly responsibility towards her children. Of course, not to mention that the father, who was in fact unfaithful, also wasn't exactly responsible for the children. So both of these parents, they just became really caught up with their personal issues that it affected the childhood of their children, Chalika and Charya. On the other hand, Pran also had a bit of a rocky childhood. I think, if I'm not mistaken, his parents also got involved in some kind of infidelity drama. And because of that, Pran's father literally just swept him off and take him away and live from place to place, because the father works at the railway station. And because of that, Pran's childhood is sort of characterized by this lack of stability and this lack of steady relationship with people of his age, with his parents. So because of all of these backgrounds of these characters, they end up having some kind of dysfunction when it comes to forming relationships with others. But at one point, Pran encounters Chalika and Charya, and they sort of form a friendship with each other. But this friendship turns out it's going to be something that is kind of complicated, exactly because of the childhood that these three characters have experienced in the past, what they've experienced from their parents, and how that really affected them since they're a kid all the way when they're teenagers, and then when they reach adulthood. So in a sense, the title of this book, The Blind Earthworm in the Labyrinth, kind of describes how these characters struggle to navigate their life, especially emotionally and psychologically. And so they're kind of like blind earthworms, just kind of wriggling their way through the labyrinth. And I thought that the imagery presented by this title to be quite apt. At first, I thought it was a little bit confusing why that title was kind of like that, but it became a recurrent imagery in this book. It's not featured like too frequently, but you definitely would see it at few places, where it really describes the characters in a, I would say, evocative way. Now, talking about evocative, this book is certainly evocative in many ways. Now, I forgot to mention that the story takes place in Thailand. And the writing of this novel is very flowery and descriptive. Like, first of all, it is descriptive in the sense that you really can feel that you are, in fact, in Thailand, or at least how this novel describes Thailand. You can really feel a strong sense of place. There are tons of descriptions that focuses mainly on flowers and plant life. There are also descriptions related to music, food, animals, nature, basically. And other forms of art. So art and nature is heavily featured in this book. And what's also kind of interesting about how art is featured in this book is that this novel doesn't necessarily just feature art and related to art, folklore and mythology that are related to local Thai culture, but it also incorporates art from foreign lands. And especially with music, classical music and rock music are featured in this book in a way that it relates to the stories of the characters. So I kind of appreciate how this book uses that aspect of how it describes art, how it describes nature, and relates it with the character study in this novel. The plot is quite thin, so if you are very much interested in a plot-driven book, maybe this one is not going to work for you. But if you like books that are kind of quiet and very much super introspective, reflective, character-driven, then maybe you will like this book. You might also like this book if you really like descriptive prose. For me, however, sometimes this book can get really intense on how descriptive it wants to get. Like at the beginning, I thought it was intriguing that I saw a lot of descriptions of flowers and plants, and I happen to like flowers and plants, so I don't mind that. But the description gets super intense, and that was only 50 pages into this book, and this book has 200 pages overall. By the time I finished this book, I thought I had literary sensory overload. There was just too much of all these beautiful flowers, beautiful arts, great music, great food, tasty food. I got so much sensory overload from all these senses in a literary way, and I was so overwhelmed by that. Now, some readers might like that. Occasionally I kind of like that as well. But here's the part that I think really helped me to decide how I feel about this whole thing. Usually, when a book features food in its content, I tend to get real life craving for food. This book features tons of food that are supposed to be scrumptious and things that I love. It features stuff like gulab jamun, which is one of my favorite foods ever, and so many other stuff. East Asian food, European food, South American food, Middle Eastern food, everything, Thai food, so many food. But I didn't feel a single twinge of craving. None at all. And I think it's likely because the inclusion of these details, not just food, but also related to other things, that makes the prose flowery. These descriptive words are just kind of superficial, and it's not really tightly related to the characters' emotions and motivation and their direction. So at the end, I couldn't exactly place how I feel about these food. What do these foods supposed to represent in terms of, the characterization of Chalika, Charya, and Pran? I don't know. I don't feel any emotional connection to these things. I don't feel any emotional connection to the classical music, to the rock music. Like, at least for the music, there is an attempt to connect it with the characters' mind and emotions and their inner turmoil. But the food, for example, it just didn't really work because they were just sort of mentioned and that's it. And as a result, it just feels really, cluttered. So because of that, it didn't really work for me. It wasn't really effective. And so, I ended up not enjoying this book as much as I wanted to. But at the same time, I also thought that it was a really interesting book. It has, it certainly has a very strong authorial voice. Like, but, maybe the style is just not, I don't resonate with the style. Like, it's not really my taste. But I think many people probably appreciate this book and enjoy it. If you like any of those things, then I think you'll probably like this book. Anyway, those are the books that I finished recently, and let me know also if you have finished this one. Oh, by the way, just kind of want to mention one thing. Now, I mentioned that this book featured the historical figure Che Guevara, and Che Guevara was kind of heavily featured in here, not too heavily in the sense that he was one of the characters in this book, like one of the important characters in this book, no. But it was important because the characters in this book are related to him in a historical way. And so, after I finished Affections, I read The Blind Earthworm in the Labyrinth, and then, boom, Che Guevara appeared again in this book. I was like, albeit not for the whole book. Che Guevara only appeared in one chapter, I think. And one of the side characters are heavily involved in social activism, not in South America, but in Thailand. But their social activism also has something to do, or kind of was inspired by Che Guevara as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I kind of like that situation where the books that I read, especially the ones that I read back to back, sort of have some kind of connection that just seemed kind of random. But it feels like these books are kind of in conversation with one another. Not so much, but a little bit of conversation, just a bit of a nod and a hi, hello, you got Che Guevara, stuff like that. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. So let me know what you are reading, and let me know if you have read these books, what did you think about them? So yeah, until then, I'll see you in a different video. Take care. Thanks for watching. I don't know if the belt in the background would look kind of weird in this video. I think it has appeared in my videos a couple of times already, but I kind of just put the belt in the background, and I just kind of realized that it's just kind of weird to have something vertically hanging in the background and like that. I don't even use belts, so anyway, bye.